Hey everyone, it's Howard here with the third one of my casual philosophy video series. This time I'm going to talk about one of my favorite philosophers. If you already know me, you know I don't shut up about this guy. It's Martin Heidegger, and I'm going to talk about a part of his philosophy that I find particularly useful, which is his account of understanding and interpretation. Now, you probably have a couple questions. The first one being, isn't Martin Heidegger that Nazi guy? To which, yes, he certainly is. And the second question then being, well then, why am I not shutting this video off right now? Now, yes, his political views are abhorrent, and if you can read between the lines of his works, you don't even need to know the explicit stuff to know that he's very fascist, and obviously I deeply disagree with that. However, that doesn't mean that the things that he writes here aren't deeply influential, and for me, I am intellectually indebted to it. One of the people that I'll mention before I get started with this is Emmanuel Levinas, who's a contemporary of Heidegger, who was a very good reader of Heidegger, and he's probably intellectually indebted to him in the same way that I myself am. Emmanuel Levinas was a Lithuanian Jew who many of his family suffered through the horrors of the Holocaust. He made it out by being in a prisoner of war camp, and he did criticize much of Heidegger's politics and fascist elements of his philosophy while still taking the things that were useful. So, if that person who's much more deeply affected by these issues can read something like this and engage with it, I don't really have an excuse why not to. So, that aside, let's actually get started with this. If you want to follow along, you can pick up a copy of Being in Time, and what I'm going to be looking at is the 5th section of Part 1, I guess subsections 31, 32, 33, dealing with understanding and interpretation. So the first question is, what is understanding? Understanding in general, when I say that I understand what you have said, when I say that I understand things that I want to do in the future, anything like that. Now, this is really vague and wide, and it should be because he's still trying to sort this out when he's writing the book. So I will give a couple little things to help narrow it down though. So one thing is that he's not talking about understanding in terms of a formal definition. So for example, with a word where you can write out its definition, understanding for him would be more being able to use the word effectively, rhetorically, for maximal effect when you're speaking and in the right times. This is a bit of an orientation about mastery and usage over formality, theoretical things. And also it's diffuse. So what do I mean by diffuse? So for example, take my phone. So as with that theoretical mastery distinction, I cannot give you a list of the amplitudes and voltages of currents that are running through it. I cannot tell you the chemical compositions of what this thing is made out of. I don't know the coding on how much of the apps in the system works. I do know how to pick it up and actually use it to make a phone call to somebody that I want to talk to, or how to surf the internet. I know how to use it as a paperweight if I need to weight something down on my desk right here. I know how to throw it at somebody across the street if I see a mugging is happening. I know how to take this item in front of me up and use it in a vast range of possibilities dependent on what I want to do at the moment. So understanding in terms of mastery and possibilities in general that something can be used for, as opposed to a theoretical, definite way of interpreting something. Okay, so that's a lot. Hopefully, this part's going to make it a little bit more simple, though. This is the part that makes it more particular and more tangible, and this is the usable part, which is interpretation. So, in interpretation, this is a smaller set of the understanding. This is when we are definite and explicit, when we understand something as a particular something else. So, for example, when I use this object as a phone, that is me picking it up and using it to make a phone call with, as opposed to all the whole range of possibilities that this could be used for. So this is one way that he defines interpretation. Not really that useful, doesn't say a heck of a lot. There's another way that he talks about it, and this one is the money, which is the three-part structure of fore-having, fore-sight, and fore-conception. And this is supposed to happen whenever we have any act of interpretation, which is we say that we understand one particular thing as a definite other thing. Okay, so what is fore-having, first of all? Fore-having is the entirety of experiences and things that we have behind us, our past and our life, to bring along when we're trying to understand what something is. So for example, the first time you show a phone to a child, they cannot pick this up and use it to make a phone call. They don't have that level of understanding or mastery. They can't make that interpretation because they don't have that available in their fore-having. They can't scan through their banks in their brain and say, I have seen this used in this way. It hasn't happened yet. It's not there, so they can't actually think that. What will be in their fore-having or experiences they may have already had of things like this is it's a toy, it's possession of mommy and daddies that I can't touch. It could be whatever the heck else. I mean, children are creative. They're going to look at things that they already understand, that they already have in their fore-having, and they're going to bring those along to try and make sense of this. Now, if you think that it's only children that this happens for, just change the example so that you have, say, people in a remote place in the world that have never seen a phone before. They're going to look into their fore-having in order to make sense of what this thing is, and likely the picking it up and using it to make a phone call isn't going to be one of the experiences that they have there. The next part is fore-sight. And fore-sight is the way that you look at the things that are currently in front of you, or the things that you have in your fore-having. So if I am thirsty right now, I will look around my room, and of all the things I have in my fore-having and the way that I'm looking around things around me right now, I'm particularly interested in things that will slack my thirst. So for example, my water bottle happens to be an empty wine bottle, which has other significances and meanings for me. I think that's hilarious. And there are other different meanings of different things that I have in my room as well. But from the point of view in which I'm in right now, it's not the hilarity of that or making a statement or a joke or anything that comes to mind. It's wanting to slake my thirst. My particular point of sight changes what I consider to be relevant from my fore-having or what's in front of me. Now that's a rather banal example, but suppose you have two people from opposing political parties who see the exact same event happen and they see markedly different things. What they're looking at and what they're drawing upon from their fore-having is being mitigated by their being on different political parties and their perspectives and what they're foreseeing from their perspectives being radically different. Okay, and the last four is fore-conception. So fore-conception is the level that we should all be familiar with. It's the level at which we can actually articulate, imagine, or do what it is we say that we want to do. So fore-conception is me knowing what I want to say and the words to say them and actually going through and doing it. Or if I can just conceive the action to myself before I actually do it, or if I actually just go and do the dang thing. So fore-conception is kind of the end layer. It's the one that can be shared and transmitted. It's the one that if you're watching right now, this is my conception, this is my doing from the fore-having that I had available and the point of view from my fore-sight that makes me articulate this. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff and that's really fast. Here's where the payoff is. What can this be used for? So suppose you're having a discussion with people that you disagree with. As I brought up the political example earlier, but there are many other examples. And never has an argument or disagreement ever actually been resolved by just going through, using more words, trying to use more logic, trying to persuade the other person that you're right, or have them persuade you that you're right, and just at this level of what we can articulate and say, just saying more things and bringing up more examples. Or rather, the other structures I've already mentioned are involved in this, even if you don't think they are. So for me, when I have a disagreement with somebody, instead of trying to think about which more words to use or how to further explain my cause or my point or whatnot, the first thing I think is, what does this person have available to them in their fore-having, and what is the way that they see it that is causing them to articulate and conceive of things in the way that they're currently doing so. And this changes the conversation a lot, because now, instead of trying to argue or win a point or being convinced of your own surety, you instead wonder, well, what are the experiences that I have that is informing my position in my fore-having that I perhaps need to share with this person? What are the experiences that they have in their fore-having that I need them to share with me? And what is their sight or the perspective with which they are looking at it currently that we would each need to get on the same page on, that's underlying our conceiving and our words and articulations? Concrete steps on how to actually go about resolving a disagreement that you have with somebody. Even if you don't have a disagreement with somebody, just trying to think about what somebody is saying in general, you can apply the exact same structure. What is their fore-having? What are the things that they're drawing upon? What is the way that they're looking at those things from their fore-sight or their perspective that is making them conceive of and articulate things in the fashion that they are doing so? This has to happen no matter what somebody says or does. It has to come from somewhere. It has to come from amongst these range of possibilities, from things that they've already experienced or they've already imagined and are currently seeing. So that's particularly rich. And there are some other applications that I believe this has as well in psychology, cognitive science, a couple other areas, but this video is already well over the 10-minute mark that I'd like these to be. So if you want to hear a couple of those, just drop me a line and I will articulate them further, maybe in the comments or something like that. But for now, we're going to leave it there. Alright, thanks for checking it out, everybody. See you later. Till next time.